Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer. It is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today, I want to talk about one of the elephants of the room in the Delirium League, and that is specifically the incredible proliferation of the Purposeful Harbinger build, why it has so decisively broken the game apart, and how it needs to be fixed. So, if you're someone that's not familiar with this site, poe.ninja, it's a site that aggregates a whole lot of information from players in the main trade leagues. And it also pays attention to the ladder. The ladder is something that GGG posts and updates regularly, and it lists approximately the 15,000 players with the most experience points in a given league. You'll notice that in Delirium we have over 15,000 players that are level 98 and higher. 43% of them are playing Guardians. Once we filter it to show only the Guardians, you'll notice that 94% are using the unique dual voices, and 81% are using the Prism Guardian unique. Essentially, these people are all playing fundamentally the same build. It's not that it is actually one build, it's that there is a broken interaction that is so broken that these players are basically all using nearly identical variants of the same build. So even though you can see here that there's a wide variety in 5+ link skills being used, they are basically all taking the same massive collection of auras and heralds, which may seem a little bit strange if you're not familiar with what's going on. Purposeful Harbinger is a notable that really broke the game in half this league. So it's on the new cluster duel system, and what it does is it grants aura buffs from skills, 10% increased effect on you for each herald affecting you. So functionally, this is a 50% boost to the effectiveness of auras. In conjunction with Endbringer, which is 25% increased damage for each herald affecting you, if you're running all 5 heralds, this is 125% increased damage. Needless to say, that's a little bit broken. The idea that GGG probably had when they were designing these was that it's very difficult to simultaneously reserve 125% of your mana to pay for 5 heralds, and also reserve any meaningful amount of auras. This, however, turned out not to be true. And that is why we have the most broken build that the game has ever seen, and the most skewed metagame that the game has seen, I believe, ever. So, let's bring up a couple of little numbers to discuss this further, because I think it's something that people blame Purposeful Harbinger, but I actually think that there's a fundamentally different cause. So what I've got here is a spreadsheet that goes through your percentage of a particular stat that I have a bugbear against, and that is reduced percentage reservation. So this is a stat that allows you to pay less than the normal price in order to reserve mana for an aura or for a herald. I actually think that fundamentally this stat is the problem, and I want to talk about why. So, what I've done here is I've assumed that you want to keep 10% of your mana free, and I've worked out how much at various levels of -% reserved, how much mana you're able to actually reserve. So if you want to keep 10% of your mana free and you've got 0 mana and you've got 0 reduced reservation, as pretty much every character under about level 65 has, then you're limited to 90% of mana reservation. So that could be a 50% aura and a 35% aura, or it could be a 50% aura and a 25% herald, but you can't fit in a 50% aura and 2 25% heralds. That's going to take at least 10% reduced reservation, and then at that point you've got 100. So this has just got some simple formulas in it that go, okay, minus 20% reservation, 113 mana can be reserved. Again, there's a few flexible ways you can do that, but probably the most powerful would be to have a 50% aura, a 35% aura, and a 25% aura, adding up to 110. 30%, you get 129. Once you start getting a bit more of this stat, the numbers explode. You'll see that I'm adding 10 at each point here, then I start only adding 1. And this second column actually seems to go up just about as fast. So I've then calculated, assuming that you used no heralds and that all of your auras were 50% mana reservation. So things like anger, things like wrath. How many auras could you run on the character with that amount of mana reservation reduction? And so you'll see here, this sort of goes up slowly. I've capped it at 16 because There's about 16 50% auras possible to get in the game, and there's also a couple of anti-synergies between some of them as well. So for instance, I couldn't imagine that you would want to use Pride and Hatred on the same character usually. Next, we've looked at the question of what if you reserve 5 Heralds? Now, you're not going to be able to do that in all of these cases, but what I've done here is just written a formula that that basically works out the amount of 50% auras you can reserve. You'll see that it's 0 up to 40%. Then once you've got 50% reduced reservation, you're able to reserve 180% of your mana, so that means that you can fit in a single 50% aura plus all 5 heralds. With 60% reduced reservation, you can fit in 2. And then that stays the same until 68%, at which point you can fit in 3. 73% you go to 4, 76% you go to 5, 79% you go to 6, 82% you go to 7, and then immediately at 83 you get to go to 8, and so on and so forth. Eventually, of course, you'll hit 16. Now, a typical Guardian build has a 46% aura effect on the tree. I had a quick look at a bunch of the builds that were on PoE.Ninja in order to check that, and it seemed like most of them had 46%. This is at level 100. If you're below level 100, you're probably going to sacrifice a little bit of this stat. But I thought, let's have a look at how the numbers look. We're going to call an aura. We're just going to say that it makes your character better by a factor of 1. Now, obviously, this is not a fair comparison. For some builds, Hatred might be better than Wrath, or Hatred might be better than Discipline. But we're just going to assume that all auras are equal. And so if you've got a passive tree setup that gives you 46% increased effectiveness of auras, and you don't spec into Purposeful Harbinger at all, this column indicates how much value you get from those auras. This second column indicates how much value you get when you've got 9 copies of Purposeful Harbinger and you're running all 5 of your heralds. So you'll notice that early on, actually, you're better off without the heralds turned on, without all the Purposeful Harbingers, because you just simply don't have enough mana to reserve even 1 aura. Then it seems fairly fair up to about this point. Up to about 67% reduced reservation, you're able to get 2 incredibly powerful auras with 9 copies of Purposeful Harbinger. It's a heavy investment, and it is better than what you'd get by just running 5 different auras at 46% aura effect instead of having 496% aura effectiveness on these ones. And I have just realized that this should be, that I've forgotten the baseline effect of the aura, so that should actually be slightly more. So it is 596% auras, not 146%, 596% effect. So it is definitely better to be Purposeful Harbinger at this point, but it's not explosively so until we get to this point, where you hit 68% reduced reservation, and you break through 275% possible reservation. At this point, you're able to run 3 6 times powered auras instead of running 5 1.46 times power auras. And at this point, your build is explosively better than the builds without Purposeful Harbinger. And this divergence keeps expanding and expanding. So, question is, what's the solution? The first option, and this is one that I've seen touted by a lot of people, is to nerf the ever-loving fuck out of Purposeful Harbinger. So currently it adds 50% aura effectiveness if you're running all 5 heralds. One suggestion I've seen floated around a bit is to change Purposeful Harbinger to give you 8% per herald affecting you, up to a maximum of 20% per copy of Purposeful Harbinger. In this case, you would end up with, instead of having 450% aura effectiveness from Purposeful Harbinger, you'd be looking at 180%, and you'd probably only run 3 heralds instead of running all 5. But if we were to do that, so we would be losing 270%, and at this point, we're looking at 3.26 instead. And you'll notice here that the numbers don't really start to diverge until we're able to reserve 5 50% auras plus all 5 heralds. At that point, they start to really diverge, and you get the same sort of power gap that you otherwise get. I'm just going to undo that change and go back to the stats as they are presently. So that's the first suggestion that I've seen. But I want to propose something different. I actually think that the broken part is not Purposeful Harbinger itself, even at its current level. The broken part is this stat. The broken part is not how powerful reduced reservation is when you get the first 50 points of it. The broken point is how much every single point explosively turbocharges your character once you get into the 60s. And for this reason, I think that what should be done is a change in the way that this stat works. It's a terrible stat on most characters. It's only really useful if you're going to be seriously abusing mana reservation on your character. So here's my suggestion. Overhaul this stat entirely. Make it better at low investment and weaker at max. Replace all sources in the game of X% reduced reservation with you may reserve Y% of your mana for free. Test it out with Y at 2 to 2.5 times the current values of X. So this would mean that the Val implicit corruption on jewels, instead of being 1% reduced reservations, it would instead be 2 or maybe even 3% free reservation. This can be really powerful when you get a small amount of it. So for a character that is leveling, you will be able to run, assuming you're able to be really frugal with your mana, you'll be able to run with just one source of reduced reservation and at a low level, like 1 or 2% under the current system, you will be able to run a build that has 2 50% auras while leveling, or that runs 2 heralds plus a single 50% aura. Then Purposeful Harbinger doesn't really begin to break badly, even with its current numbers, until you're allowed to reserve 275% of your mana. And it doesn't break the game in half until you're able to reserve 375%. So this suggestion, I believe, can prevent 375% happening at all. Full stop, gone, kaput, no longer a problem. But it will leave 275% and 325% as major endgame gear goals, major milestones that you can try and chase down as you're looking to power up your character in the very, very, very late game. So I think that we'll end up, if this were to be the form that the nerf takes, we won't see a repeat of this insanity at the moment, where 43% of the highest level characters are running Guardians, and almost all of them are running Voices and running a whole bunch of auras, a whole bunch of heralds, and are basically just simply stomping through the game, finding no challenge from anything, whilst other players who aren't using this almost cheat code find themselves actually genuinely struggling with the quite difficult content that was added in Delirium. So anyway, that's my suggestion as to how to fix the mess that the Delirium League is in at the moment. As far as I'm concerned, the sooner this happens, the better. I'm really losing interest in the league because the meta is so fundamentally broken that you either play the broken build or you accept that the things that are genuinely rare in the game, things like Headhunter, things like powerful Watcher's Eyes, that you're going to be locked out of these because the people who are cheesing this mechanic can simply pay more than you can for them. So for that reason, I've really lost interest in the league because there's no achievable goals that I feel I can get to short of engaging in the cheese myself. I've tried leveling one of the broken characters and just found it was just not fun at all. So that's my thoughts. If you've got any comments or questions, though, definitely fire away below. I'm going to leave it there. I hope you have a good one.